biggest ever ever taken. Small Waters is on a big water today. We're on Lake St. Clair with Scott Dobson. Scott, you've had some tremendous success, including last year a 29.6 sack of 5 smallmouth on St. Clair that many believe to be the biggest ever ever taken.
Is a 5/8 ounce silver buddy, original silver buddy, and what I do is I take the original hooks off, put a number 4 snap or a split ring on there, and this hook here that I'm using is a short shank Gamakatsu Magic Eye, which is good so your hooks don't get tangled up together. The long shank trebles seem to get tangled up and it impedes the action of the bait. This is the original silver buddy where the blade here is actually silver. It's not going to chip off and show.
It's not plated.
Yeah, it's not plated, so it's actually stainless steel. Thin wire. You know, it's bendable. You can straighten it out, and that generates the most vibration on the bait. And ultimately, anytime the water temp is below around 55 degrees, you can catch when the water dips right below 60, but 55 degrees. Right down into the low 40s is when the bait really shines, and it's just as great in the fall as it is in the spring. And one thing that a lot of people do is they tend to work the bait too much, and there are days when you can stroke the silver buddy or the blade bait and generate strikes, but the main thing is to hold your rod tip at about 3 o'clock and just give subtle short lifts. And right there I picked up a little grass, so I'm going to bring that in, correct my bait.
Now you're feeling, you need to feel that bait all the time, and you're when you're talking about short strokes here, you're talking feeling that vibration 2-3 times, maybe 4, 5, 6 times.
Yeah, my thing that I tell my friends and people I take out is less is best. So the less you can work the bait, once it hits the bottom, a lot of times they'll eat it right off the bottom without even moving the bait. So once it hits the bottom, reel up on your slack and just simply give it about 5 or 6 little flutters. Drop it back down, lift it up, reel down on your slack, let it hit the bottom. Just little short hops, almost like you're hopping basically like you're hopping a tube bait, or hopping a jig across the bottom. If you start working it really hard and lifting your rod tip way up, you're bringing that bait, you know, 5 or 6 feet off the bottom, and yeah, you can catch fish like that, but as long as you keep the bait on the bottom, short little hops, you're going to increase your chances of hooking more fish. The more you rip the bait up over top of the fish and come down, you're getting out of the strike zone. And you know, today it's October 25th. Water temperature is 55.1 degrees. Prime time for catching fish on the silver buddy. We started out this morning. I think we caught about 30 fish. We moved out a little bit on the lake on some rock piles, and there's not a lot of smallmouth here particularly, but we did catch a couple drum, and I think we might run up back to the river mouth where there's a lot more shad and throw the buddy around a little bit more. The critical component with hooking fish on the buddy is, this is a Dobbins Champion Extreme. It's a 742, which is a 7-foot 4-inch 2-power. That would be like a medium fast action rod. And if you look at the tip of the rod here, we got a lot of backbone and we got a lot of tip. Now, another rod that I use, if they're eating it really good and I'm not worrying about the hooks ripping out, this is a Dobbins Champion Extreme. That's a 743. That's a 7-foot 4-inch 3-power, which is a medium heavy fast action. That's got more backbone, still has a fast tip, and fluorocarbon 100% of the time. I go anywhere from 12-pound fluorocarbon up to like 16. If I'm throwing like a 1/4 ounce buddy, on an inland lake, or if it's a finicky bite, crystal clear water, I'll throw it on a spinning rod with 8 or 10 pound test. But out here on the Great Lakes, medium to medium heavy rod, fast action tip, 14 to 16 pound fluorocarbon. I use Sunline, which is a really good high quality fluorocarbon. Always have a snap on your buddy, on your blade bait, and always replace the standard hooks with split rings and good high quality short shank treble hooks, and you're going to catch a lot of fish on the blade bait.
Okay.
And not only does it work for smallmouth, it's incredible on largemouth too. Anytime, like I said, that water is below 55 degrees, fall, October, November, depending on which part of the country you're in, and then again in the spring. As soon as the ice thaws off, you can come out on the Great Lakes here on Lake St. Clair or Lake Erie and immediately start catching fish on a blade bait. It's just a phenomenal bait. Covers a lot of water. You're going to catch hundreds of fish on one bait, and very seldomly do you break off. I mean, you'll break off in rocks, but typically if you get hung up in the rocks with heavier fluorocarbon, you can straighten the treble hook out and you can replace the treble and go back to fishing.
As an exceptional cold water bait, what can we attribute its effectiveness?
Well, a lot of times this time of year in the fall, you have a lot of shad, and when you have these cold snaps, shad start dying off, and basically a dying shad is an easy meal to a bass or any predator fish. So why are they going to expend a lot of energy to chase down a bait if they got a shad falling down to the bottom, flickering around, fluttering on the bottom? And that basically mimics a dying shad, is the blade bait. Vibrating up, falling down, laying on the bottom, jumping up, trying to last breath of life, and the fish is going to come over and just eat it. And a lot of times the strikes on the blade bait are violent. A lot of times it's subtle. You may drop your bait down to the bottom, you lift up, and the fish has it. But if you can watch your line and you get tuned in to your bait, a good high sensitive graphite rod, you'll feel that fish actually come over and pick that bait up off the bottom, and your line will tick, and then you know you have a strike. Reel down on your slack and just lean back into them. You don't want to drop your rod tip and snap set the hook, because you'll miss the fish a lot of times, or hook them under the chin. So basically when I get a bite on a blade bait, instead of really jerking the rod really hard, I just kind of lean back into them and just start reeling. You'll have them hooked every time.
It's almost a finesse approach that you're taking with this bait, and I was surprised to see how many times this morning we had hits from fish while that bait was dead on the bottom.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, the fish is sitting down on the bottom this time of year in the fall. Fish are on the bottom, they're holding tight to the bottom, they're feeding on gobies, they're feeding on shad, they're feeding on perch, and that blade bait's coming down, it actually vibrates a little bit and shimmies on the way down the bottom, and if they see it coming down, boom, it lands on the bottom. They're going to swim right over it and eat it. And there's been a lot of times on sunny days in clean water lakes, inland lakes, where you can see the bottom in 13, 14 feet of water, where I'll throw my blade bait out, I'll watch it fall down the bottom, I can see it laying on the bottom reflecting in the sun, and I can watch the smallmouth come over, and they'll gather around and they'll look down at the bait, and I can just rock the blade bait on the bottom, and they'll just eat it just like a jig or a tube right off the bottom. Another thing is, you'll get a bite, you'll miss a fish, just give it another flutter, drop it back down, and 9 times out of 10, this time of the year, the fish are really aggressive. They'll come back and eat it again. Like this morning, for instance, I had one fish that I think it was the 4th strike before I actually landed the fish and hooked it. So phenomenal bait. Don't overwork it. Less is best. Be in tune with your bait. You got to feel the action of the bait vibrating, and 90% of the time you're going to get that bite on the down stroke of the bait. You're either going to hit it right on the bottom, or after you lift it up and it flutters as it falls back down, that's when they strike. Very rarely, if ever, do I actually catch them on an upstroke of vibrating up. It's always on the downstroke or off the bottom. So plenty of blade baits out there to use. Vibey makes a good high quality blade bait. Poor Boys makes a good high quality blade bait. Silver Buddy, Hedden makes the Sonic. Demiki's got one out called the Vault. There's all different kind of blade baits out there. People pour them at home. It's all about the action and the vibration on your bait. Some days I'll go to a large profile blade bait, like this one here in particular. This is a large framed blade bait here. That's the Vibey. And then an example of a small frame bait here. This one's caught hundreds of fish right here. That's a 1/2 ounce small frame bait right there. And that was actually purple, which is now purple and chrome. And then here's this here. It's a 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce bait, and it's working pretty well. It's got a little bit different kind of action, which will, you know, obviously come and play in certain conditions. So just play around with the different baits, see what the fish want. If you can key in on the size of the bait that the fish are eating, then that can dictate what size frame blade bait you're going to want to throw. So standard fare is 1/2 ounce, and then you can work from there, up or down.
Now I noticed on this bait, Scott, that you've got, this one has 4 position holes for your snap. Do you vary that positioning of your snap very often?
I do vary the positioning of the snap on the bait. If I'm going vertical, I'll put it towards the middle or the back. And if I'm casting, I'm going to use the front too. That's a great question. So if you're casting your blade bait, like out here on the Great Lakes, we're covering a lot of water, we're doing a lot of casting, I'm going to use the front 2 hooks. If you're vertical, you're going to use your middle or your back hook, and just kind of get a pulse of how the fish bite the bait. So vertical, you're going to want to go in your middle hole, and if you're casting, you're going to want to use your forward holes on with your snap.
Okay. Great tips. Thanks, Scott.
Hey, you're welcome. Grab yourself a blade bait, go catch some smallmouth or largemouth. They work great.
The biggest ever taken.